Sitting in front of me here, we have a Wilson Baiardo Tune Pro. This machine, among other things, does measure weight, balance, and swing weight. This is a machine that very, very few places carry or have. It's a very advanced machine that can match rackets, match paddles together, make sure the specs of a racket or paddle are anywhere that you want them to be, essentially. And in this video, we're going to talk about a few of those specs that we most commonly use and can use with this machine. The specs of a racket or paddle, that is the weight, balance, and swing weight, are what make every racket and paddle unique, and they all affect what you're experiencing when interacting with a racket or paddle. We'll break down the essentials of weight, balance, and swing weight, and how they change racket and paddle characteristics, such as power, maneuverability, and shock, or what you feel in your arm. Weight refers to the overall weight of the frame or paddle and is measured simply by laying the racket or paddle on a scale. Most modern rackets weigh between 8 and 12 ounces, and most paddles come in between 7 and 9 ounces. There's no rule governing how light or heavy a racket or paddle can be, however many things change when you change the weight. Power potential increases as the weight increases because there's more mass or weight moving through the ball and sending more energy to the ball at impact. Maneuverability will decrease, however, because a heavier racket or paddle is much harder to swing. As weight increases, the amount of shock is decreased because the heavier weight is less affected by the impact of the ball, and the paddle will absorb more of that energy. While weight is a key component, that measurement alone does not tell the whole story. The distribution of that weight throughout the racket or paddle has the largest effect on its feel and how it can play. Balance refers to the point on a racket or paddle where it will balance lengthwise. This may also be referred to as the center of gravity, and shows how the weight is distributed along the length of the racket or paddle. When balanced on a balance board, this is the point where half of the weight is on one side and half is on the other. Generally, rackets and paddles can be described as head light if the balance point is less than half the length of the racket or paddle, and head heavy if the balance point is more than half the length, as measured from the bottom of the paddle or racket. Even balance means the balance point is half the overall length of the racket or paddle. Power will increase as the balance point goes higher, as a head-heavy racket has more mass or weight in the area striking the ball and transmitting more energy to the ball. As the balance point goes higher, the maneuverability will decrease because the weight gets further from your hand and the racket or paddle is going to feel heavier and harder to maneuver. The shock, however, will decrease as the balance point goes higher because there's more mass driving through the impact of the ball, so better for your arm. Now that we know about weight and balance, we can use this combination to understand the most important spec for how a racket or paddle plays, and that is the swing weight. Swing weight is probably the most complicated spec to understand, but it is also the most important in terms of how a racket or paddle will swing and how it will feel in a player's hand. Unlike the static measurements of weight and balance, swing weight is a dynamic measurement of how difficult the frame is to swing. It is a combination of the weight and balance and is measured using specialized equipment like the Tune Pro. Rackets and paddles with higher swing weight tend to feel heavier and less maneuverable than those with a lower swing weight. Two rackets of identical weight and balance can have very different swing weights and therefore perform very differently. At the same time, two rackets could also have completely different weight and balance measurements, but still have an identical swing weight. Power will increase as swing weight goes higher, as with weight and balance, as a racket or paddle with more mass at the impact location will return more energy to the ball. Maneuverability, however, will decrease as the swing weight increases for the same reasons, as more mass is further from your hand. Shock will also decrease as the swing weight moves higher, as more mass will absorb more of the impact, and again, be more friendly for your arm. So, when looking at a racket or paddle, it's best to consider not only the static weight, but also the balance and how this will affect the swing weight to get a much more accurate idea of how the racket or paddle will feel when swinging. All of these three specs will affect the power, maneuverability, and shock of the racket or paddle. Look out for some future videos where we'll take a deeper dive into the world of weight, balance, swing weight, and customization, and their effects on racket and paddle characteristics. Visit Raise Rackets for personalized equipment recommendations and racket and paddle customization for players of all levels.